I'm Fanita English, and Mel has asked me to tell you something about my concept of the three drives. I'm a transactional analyst, and transactional analysis is described by the International Transactional Analysis Association, which you can look up under ITAA. Remember, it's two A's, International Transactional Analysis Association. Anyway, I became interested in describing or figuring out what it is that animates us from birth to death. For instance, the ancient Greeks imagined that gods or goddesses on Olympus influenced them through their various attributes and affected them and got them to feel or think or operate in different ways. In the same way, I like to imagine that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are affected by three drives. I call them drives. And I imagine I look at them as three dancing nymphs or goddesses or whatever you can picture. And I call them Survia for serving, Passia for passionate, and Transcia for transcendence, which are three ways of being. When Survia is affecting me, I care about my survival, that's why it's called Survia, and about what all that affects my survival: food, clothing, warmth, career, whatever. So whenever I'm operating under Survia, I'm concerned with all these pain and all these other ways of being or feeling or thinking or experiencing that are related to my survival. When I'm being affected by Passia, it's creativity. Passia stands for passion, for creativity, and it includes sexuality, by the way, which is also related to creativity, of creating a new creature on earth. And any other form of creativity that a person gets involved in, be it in aesthetics or writing or painting or decoration or whatever we consider to be creative. Transcia is our ability to let go from transcendence, to transcend, to get out, to get away from everyday concerns, away from Survia, away from Passia, and just get outside ourselves. Specifically, for instance, when Survia is affecting me, I am conscious of time. I can be aware of the clock and the time something takes. When Passia is affecting me, I lose track of time. I get so involved that I don't know what I'm doing, and I'm absolutely surprised when time has gone by while I was involved. And when I'm in Transcia, again I operate with a different sense of time. I get out of myself and I'm outside of time. I don't experience time anymore. I'm just outside there. So, going back to my image, I imagine these three nymphs or goddesses or drives which affect me dancing, and they can dance around and rotate amongst each other, so that I am influenced occasionally by Survia. I'm concerned about the food I eat or the clothes or the warmth or whatever, or any pain I have and something like that. When I'm Passia, I'm totally involved in whatever I'm doing that I care about, and I'm not concerned with anything about well-being. I'm just concerned with whatever it is I'm doing. Madame Curie is an example of somebody who was totally involved in Passia. She cared about her discovery of Röntgen, as you know, and it meant sitting in a dark room with all kinds of material and separating the radioactivity, the elements of radioactivity from the other. And she didn't care about anything else. She wasn't interested in being, she wasn't hungry, she wasn't sleepy, she wasn't about to do anything else but do that. At a certain stage in her life, her grown daughters asked her to stop working with all that because she had already developed cancer and it was going to harm her and kill her to be continuing. And her attitude was she didn't care. All she cared about was this activity, which anybody else would consider to be an awful, boring, deadening activity. All she cared about was doing that, and eventually it did lead to her death. And this is an example of somebody totally involved in Passia and unwilling to allow the other drives to come in and operate. A guru is an example of someone involved in Transcia. He or she is totally outside and doesn't care about sleep or hunger or pain and can sit on a bed of nails and be totally quiet. And Survia, of course, are the people involved in everyday life and enjoy talking about their food or their clothes or their friends in a mundane way. So these drives relay each other, and at various times I may be operating under one drive or another, and a well-balanced person keeps operating under all three drives at various times. And two drives sometimes may combine, but not three, just as we can dance forwards and backwards and sideways, and can also dance forward and sideways at the same time, but we can't dance forwards, sideways, and backwards at the same time. So there's always at least one drive that is excluded for the benefit of either two or one, which is affecting me at a certain time. And that's essentially all I have to say about my theory of the three drives. I think about three drives as I work with clients because I'm a therapist, or as I am concerned with myself at various times. But of course, the moment I'm concerned with myself, it means that Survia has come to the fore. And essentially, that's all I can say. Mm-hmm. I can give you examples, as I gave you about Madame Curie on Passia. But other than that, this is it.
Mm-hmm. When one identifies with one of the motivators, to the exclusion of the others perhaps, what difficulties could this bring into your life? For example, you are predominantly ruled by Passia, I think.
Yes.
So how does this affect your life when you're dealing with people who are predominantly motivated by, let's say, Survia? Does this create problems for you?
I get very bored. When I like to be in Survia to some extent. I am concerned about the food I eat and the clothes I wear and the weather outside. So I do allow a certain amount of time for Survia, but I get very annoyed when I'm surrounded by people whose only interest is being in Survia, which is the case in very many people around me. In my surroundings. On the other hand, some people are so passionate about one thing that is not my interest. For instance, an artist may be very passionate about his or her painting and the color and the light, and I may enjoy watching that for a while, but I would not want to forget going to dinner while watching art. Or a musician might be totally engrossed in composing a piece or playing a piece on the piano to the exclusion of other things. So, and I do like to meditate, I do like to relax. Sleeping, by the way, is also an operation of Transcia. It's a more pedestrian operation than being spiritual, but we all operate with Transcia much of the time when we sleep.
And what role would dreams play in this?
Beg your
What
pardon?
role would dreams play in this for a person predominantly influenced by Transcia?
That's a fascinating question. I don't know. I don't have the answer. Technically, when I dream, Passia is coming through Transcia because I'm sleeping. So it's Passia and Transcia, but my dreams, they're creative, but they don't create anything on earth. It's my personal creativity, if you will. Some people have very exciting dreams, and other people have very boring dreams.
So if a person was predominantly motivated by Survia, what problems could that person have with the other two motivators? With people who are predominantly motivated by Passia and Transcia?
Well, people tend to find pals or friends or colleagues or partners who supplement or complement them in one way or another. I'm aware of the different drives. See, I'm a therapist. At least not now, but I was practicing as a therapist, and I was very aware of what was important for the person I was working with. So in that sense, my theory of drives is very important. Other than that, I don't know that the theory is that important, frankly. I don't think you need to know much about the theory in order to live your life.
Right.
But sometimes knowledge of these drives or the way in which two drives, for instance, might tend to exclude a third drive might cause some emotional problems.
What would those emotional problems be?
Well, they would be different. I mean, they would apply really to the people one selects for as partners or colleagues or company or friends.
You said that people tend to, as sort of a compensating factor, choose people with a drive that they may be unfamiliar with. At what point would that be unsustainable? At what point would that be unsustainable? For example, a person might fall in, a person whose predominant motivation is Survia might fall in love with someone who is predominantly motivated by Transcia.
Oh, well, that's a very good example. Or they would experience imbalance and they would not be able to tolerate each other long enough. I mean, I consider that my knowledge and awareness of these drives and the fact that so all three drives can't operate at the same time. So that a well-balanced person uses all three drives at various times and they rotate harmoniously, and that's a good dance. If they don't rotate harmoniously, if one of them takes over to the exclusion of the other, it's going to cause problems, and I've got this awareness when I work with people who are experiencing problems. That's all I can say on that.
At this stage in your life, what have you learned is most important for you?
Nothing, I will have to say. I think it depends on the conditions of one's life. At the present time, I'm old, I'm handicapped.
You're 102 right now.
Yes. The Survia part of me is pleased that I'm still alive and able to function. On the other hand, and my Survia has to be involved a great deal of the time because I suffer pain, I have to care about the medication I take. A lot of my time is spent in concerns that are Survia concerns, and I don't have any real opportunities for creativity, which in my case happen to be in the area of working with people.
And in that you were particularly passionate about.
Yeah, that's what I was passionate about. And nowadays I don't do that. I enjoy reading, where I can get excited by certain ideas or books. And I like the friends who are enjoy the same talking ideas. For instance, in an extreme way, I'm just reading a book about how Hannah Arendt. Philosophers enjoy talking to each other. Other people find that conversation totally boring. So I can enjoy a little bit of Passia vicariously by reading.
And what about Transcia? Now that you're 102, you're...
I do like to meditate, and it's helpful to me. When I feel upset and angry, I do know how to switch into meditation, and it's very helpful.
How is spirituality important for your life right now? And what is spirituality exactly for you?
Oh, I have no idea. I have no idea. I have not considered myself a spiritual person. I mean, there are people who are very religious and very spiritual and gain a great deal of comfort and pleasure out of their belief system. I have a very agnostic belief system. I really know that I don't know, and I have a few ideas.
But when you were younger, you spent some time in India, I think perhaps
Yes.
in an ashram?
I enjoyed it very much.
And what did you learn from that?
Well, I had many Indian friends, I still do, and I liked their approach to life. They used to always have time for meditation, for spirituality. It's of a kind that I liked. I mean, some of it transformed into, you know, all these gods and goddesses. I mean, I didn't believe in them, in any of them, but they used to get a great deal of pleasure out of dealing with these various gods and goddesses, and I could participate.
Did you feel that their ideas of gods and goddesses were manifestations of qualities in themselves?
Were manifestations of what?
Of qualities in themselves, in your friends?
Yes, yes. Well, that's a very good, by the way, that's a very creative question. It would be worth exploring, as you say it now, yes. I never thought of that.
How would we go about exploring
But now that
that?
you say that, I think it's worth considering.
Okay.
Yes. And that may have been one of the aspects I appreciated about them.
What drew you to India?
What?
What drew you to be in India, spend time in India?
Oh, at the time, it was a love affair with an Indian, a man who was brilliant, who's now dead. And I wanted to learn more about Indian, and I spent some time with a guru. At a certain period of my life, when my son died in a very unfortunate accident in the Pacific Ocean, I got involved with all kinds of belief systems, but discovered that they're not useful for me or didn't work.
You were trying to find some comfort in ways of dealing with your grief?
Yes. But I still identify very much with Indian attitudes, although at the present time I don't have the opportunity to practice anything like that.
Fanita, in your life and in your career, you've explored many different aspects of the human condition.
Yes.
And you've asked many questions. Is there one question that you would like answered right now at this point in your life?
No more, and not really. I used to have a lot of questions and explored some of them with more or less satisfactory answers, none of them with perfect answers. And at this point, I really know that I am ready to die. I'm ready to step out. I would like to step out with as little pain or no pain. And I really feel that I'm ready to say goodbye to those I loved in the past and those I love in the present. For instance, my daughter and my son-in-law, whom I dearly love, I have not had any. I've had 2 children. My son died, unfortunately, before me, at age 31, but he enjoyed life. He had a lot of different little passions, and he had lots of fun. He was very active in various ways. And so even though he only lived 31 years, I think he enjoyed his life. And so I can think of him with pleasure. Not even anymore with sadness. He's gone, he's gone. My daughter, fortunately, is alive and still very creative. She teaches, and she has very good students, and she's excited by her work, and she's a source of great pleasure, and she's also a great source of support for my Survia, because I do have all kinds of aches and pains and problems, and I depend on my daughter a great deal nowadays, and also on my son-in-law, who's wonderful and who's very, very helpful. So I don't have any grandchildren. It's all right. Maybe that's one reason I'm not as interested in Survia pursuits, I suppose, if I had a lot of grandchildren, but I enjoy a lot of friends. I used to be very angry whenever one of my trainees died, because I felt that it was unfair. I taught you things that you were supposed to teach them on, and how dare you die? So my reaction to notice information about the death of one or another of my friends used to be anger instead of sorrow. But I've cured that. Mm-hmm. I no longer get angry when I hear of somebody's death, and I welcome them for whatever they have done and produced in life.
Now that you're approaching your own death, what does that mean to you? I mean, many people throughout history have felt that the question of what is death is probably the most important question you can ask, because in many ways it determines how you will live your life. Do you have any thoughts about what death is?
I can't answer it. I don't. I have a fantasy.
What is that?
That we consist of all these mini atoms, whatever name we can give them. And that at our death they are dispersed. We are body atoms are dispersed and deteriorate and become a part of the universe. And I like the Buddhist image of a drop in the ocean, except that the ocean I visualize is much bigger than perhaps than the Buddhist ocean, a huge ocean. And I imagine life like a spurt of activity, like a spurt, like a what can I say, a spurt of life.
Perhaps a wave?
A wave up in the air. And I imagine there's a peak at it, and then gradually the drops come down and come into the ocean and melt away into the universe. And for instance, I do believe that people who talk about past lives, and you have occupied yourself a lot with people who talked about past lives, I believe that they really that everybody carries with them some atoms of something from the past. And they may be experiencing some kind of scrap of life in the past. I don't know. I think there are so many universes now. We really don't know what's going on. And I'm willing to accept the idea that I don't know, and that that nobody knows. And any kind of an image that anybody manages to develop, I've developed this kind of image, is good enough. That's it.